Tavi Gevinson, welcome to Bullseye. I'm happy to have you back on the show.
Thanks, Jesse. I'm really happy to be here.
It's nice to see you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I can't complain. Except I guess in private, but no, things are good. How are you?
Genuinely sound like you're trying to convince yourself that you can't complain.
No, things are good. Life is good.
Here's the thing. So listening to the new show, the new podcast, Glimpses of the Moon, and reading fan fiction, your most recent blog, and knowing your life as I do to some extent, it feels like a heavy period of reckoning for you.
With?
Like trying to get a handle on the very weird phenomena of the early part of your career.
Oh, yeah, I guess that's true. I mean, I think I've done, let's see. I guess I try to do a lot of reckoning that doesn't go into things I publish because I don't want them to feel like therapy. But naturally, I am interested in, I can do a lot with the worlds that these two different pieces are set in because I know them very well. The fashion world, media, the world of Taylor Swift and fandom and the internet. So I guess maybe there was earlier reckoning. And I'm sure there are things I'm still working out or things that are in the pieces that I wasn't really aware of that are more personal or revealing than I meant. But at this point, I just sort of feel like, what a weird life I've had and what a gift. And what can I do with this? This is wild. This is inspiring.
I mean, one of the things that I was thinking about as I was both reading fan fiction, the zine that you made, and listening to Glimpses of the Moon, is that your career on the internet, like it's one thing to say you were born with the internet, right? You were raised with the internet, and that is true. But there's a really big change in the way the internet works for people making stuff that happened at that point in your life that we're talking about, right? That like when you were a 12-year-old fashion blogger, the World Wide Web was still the center of the internet. And you could publish things to Blogspot or whatever platform. Mm-hmm. And you were the author. People went to your website, chose to go to your website. Maybe some of them subscribed to an RSS feed or something. And by the time you were 18, 19, 20, and you were trying to make Rookie and so on and so forth, you were living in an almost post-blog world where creating stuff was mediated through, algorithmic platforms like Instagram.
Yeah, a lot has changed in the 15 years since I started my blog. I mean, Rookie, I believe, launched the same year that Instagram started. And I didn't even have an iPhone when Rookie launched. I had like a slide phone and I was like texting our editors from school. But, I mean, a point of pride with Rookie, I think, was that even till the bitter end, which it folded in 2018, we still had, like, most of our traffic still came from people going directly to the website, which is something that tech and money people always found really shocking, and they couldn't believe it wasn't just kind of people casting about on social media and maybe taking the bait and then going to our site. So I feel like really lucky that with Rookie had this dedicated readership for so long. But I guess fan fiction is sort of, maybe on some level, me processing that constant content making being part of my brain, and Glimpses of the Moon is a little more, there are some of those layers going on and layers of performance with these characters, but what I was thinking about was this sort of collision between legacy media and social media that's going to sound like really niche and inside baseball maybe. But
Well, Tavi, you're here in part to promote a zine that you wrote, like it was 1989. Got an REM album you want to push.
yeah, I know. I'm trying to find the plot. As you just mentioned, the internet's changed so much, so I'm casting about putting these out there. But I guess like when I started my blog, it was like fashion blogging was this new thing, and it seemed like the biggest threat you could imagine to print magazines. Like, I mean, I think it was kind of, journalists sort of creating a story where there wasn't much of a story, but it seemed like blogs were the future and that this was democratizing journalism in a very frightening way. And then, of course, that feels very quaint now. Even blogs feel quaint, like you said. And I guess that's part of why that show, like when I read the Wharton book that it's based on, the Edith Wharton book, and, there's obviously a theme of old money and new money, it felt really fun to set it now and set it against this backdrop of like, a Met Ball full of TikTokers or whatever.
But there are like multiple changes here. And you alluded to this intermediary world, right? So you had a world of the World Wide Web where people had to choose to go to something.
Mm-hmm.
And, blogging changed that in that it made it easy for a normal person to change what was at a website. But like, it's still like, it's choosing to go to a place to look at the thing, because that's a place you like. Maybe you have it bookmarked, maybe it's in your head, whatever. There was an intermediary place where Twitter and Facebook were outbound traffic senders. And over the course of the last 10 years, those platforms, those Twitters and Facebooks and Instagrams, and now TikTok, figured out, why are we sending people to other people's websites when we could force everyone creative to have to live in our advertising ecosystem?
Yeah, and then we were like, let's try to have really complicated, nuanced conversations and to transform society on this horrible app.
I mean, part of that Instagram world, which is probably the place where you personally have been most invested, is that, blogging is certainly a very personal medium, relatively speaking. But even first-person writing isn't nearly as weirdly personal as first-person picture taking. Like, putting a picture of yourself up in that context and like making that a story that people connect with is a really intense act. Like, it's a really weird thing to do,
I agree that it's weird, but I think I feel the opposite or the inverse.
Really?
Like, to me, at this point, I'm like, a photo of someone is like, we're so inundated with them that it almost is nothing to me. And maybe also with my knowledge that I could post a picture of garbage on my floor and be like, oh, this was really hard for me to post. But I'm getting over my fear of posting pictures of garbage on my floor. And I would get a bunch of comments that are like, so brave, thank you so much. I think the way that all that has become, I guess what I'm getting at is like false intimacy. Like these things that maybe at an earlier time did feel like you were really getting access to someone. Now I think there's just so much of that I'm kind of like, writing feels way more intimate to me, like, merging with another person's consciousness as a reader, and as a writer, knowing that you're actually transmitting images to the reader's mind that come from your mind and are not necessarily, what you look like.
I mean, part of what you had to do as an adolescent when you were making your fashion blog was like demonstrate through various means that you were the author of your own work?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I didn't have to, but I wanted to. I was like, no, this is me. I want credit.
How do you think that affected the kind of stuff that you were able to make at the beginning of your career, that it was so important to you to demonstrate that it was your work?
Well, when I think back, I think so much of what was supporting me was kind of invisible to me. Like, I couldn't identify or really appreciate that a blog sort of gives you this automatic format of a post a day. And I think to have that practice was actually really conducive to a lot of creativity and a lot of momentum and not overthinking things. And I think the same goes for, even though I had a tripod and I put a lot of work into the photos I was taking, like I thought of them as outfit photos. I didn't think of them as self-portraits. I didn't think I was a photographer. They were mostly about documenting my outfit, and sometimes they were about, the setting and the editing and more than that. But I think that what I'm saying is not really related to your question, except that I guess it's hard for me to know how. I mean, it's really hard to remember my brain when I was that age and to know that I was aware of how, like, it probably gave me a bit of a chip on my shoulder about credit and authorship and having, seeming like a person who has autonomy and who made work really consciously and intentionally and wasn't just, it wasn't like just a thing that happened to me. But I'm not sure how it affected the creativity itself to have this feeling of, oh, people think it isn't me or something. I think being written about and photographed and at a young age, or maybe at any age, it does force you to dissociate a lot. And I think that is a double-edged sword. And I think the kind of nice edge that I'm really glad that I have now is this sense of kind of being able to take yourself out of your work or the way your work is received.
Is that actually the case? I mean, I ask because I'm 43 years old. I can't do that. Somebody says something about me personally on the internet, I'm bent out of shape about it.
Yes. I mean, I also think my ability to intellectualize it was a way to not feel that kind of injury. But, I mean, I have all the different things I could tell you that are like how to think about criticism in a way that won't make you want to never make anything ever again. But I think no matter what, there's still also the emotional response you're describing. Like, it still stings a bit.
I mean, what I think of with you is that when I was preparing for this interview, every commentary that I saw about your work, particularly, people's reactions to fan fiction, was about you in a way that, when it happens for me, I'm surprised, right? Like, everybody experiences art as a relationship with the creator to some extent, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like, when somebody tells me about how I look or something, I'm like, oh, weird. And I think that you, in the worlds that you inhabit, being a woman and not a man, the demographic cohort you're in, people experience all your work as a fundamental expression of who you are, and that they are then having a reaction to you as a person rather than to your work as a work. And that is intense.
It's interesting because that's something that the narrator talks about in fan fiction. Reading women as objects in their own writing rather than subjects and authors with agency who, are knowingly disclosing things or using details of their life for formal or aesthetic reasons and not purely like transcribing their experience to you without making a zillion artistic choices. Although, I mean, in whatever I saw, I think I was, well, I did feel like I saw people just engaging with the writing, which was fun, but I also think the piece is designed to invite some of what you're describing. I mean, that's what Taylor Swift does, and it is, in the many ways, the piece is, me trying to do things she does in her songwriting that I like or find provocative. I was most surprised when someone would totally understand that the piece was fictional, but take for granted some piece of it as true and be like, oh, it's about how like Tavi met Taylor this way. And maybe it's a weakness in the writing, but I was like, ooh, wait, I caught you. Like, why do you trust that thing, but not this other thing?
So, you had this one long career as a teen fashion blogger, starting before you were a teen, but adolescent fashion blogger. Part of the story in fan fiction is a character based on you as a sort of like transitional young adult, right? Visiting colleges, deciding not to go to colleges, which is something that you really did. And like going around with your dad, which I know is real because you came to my office with your dad one time. But I wonder, like, when you decided, I'm not going to go to college, I am going to move to New York and audition for acting jobs. What led you to that point?
I had gotten a role in the play This Is Our Youth when I was still a senior in high school, and I left school 2 weeks early to start rehearsals for it in Chicago at Steppenwolf. And then it moved to Broadway, and I deferred school for a year and thought the play would be my gap year. And then as I was doing it, it just made less and less sense to do a design your own major thing, because between that and Rookie, I was like, wait, I'm going to be spending so much money to get credit for things that I'm already doing. If I wanted to study something else, that would have been different, but just financially, I mean, mostly in the sense that like I was already doing what I wanted to do and learning a lot in the field. So it just made sense to keep going.
I know you had acted for a long time, through a big part of your life, and that had always been a goal for you. But by the time you got there to Broadway as an 18, 19-year-old, was part of the appeal of acting the relative freedom from self-authorship, like that you could be pretend to be somebody else as your job?
Absolutely. For those 2.5 hours, you don't have to think of what to say. You can stretch the limits of a work of writing that you love as much as you can imagine. Like, I don't know, if you love English class, like then being able to do a play that you love is really stimulating. And yeah, to be seen a different way, seen as a character, seen even as an actor, to know there were people in the audience who didn't know anything about my other career. There were all kinds of passages to other ways of being in that experience that I did find. I mean, it was a lot of pressure to do that play just because I did not have that much professional acting experience, and it felt like it could go really poorly. But once we're in the swing of things, I found it very liberating, and it's a lot of why I've stayed here and continued to do a lot of theater.
Did you consider at any point divorcing your career completely from sort of first person representations? Did you ever think like, I should just stop taking pictures of myself, writing about myself, existing on the social media world, and just be, whether it's an actor or a journalist who writes about other people in a real journalisty type way, or whatever? Like, did you ever think like, I'm just going to go away from all that stuff into this other world that's safer?
Well, pictures feel like part of the job as an actor. I don't take as many of myself, nearly as many as I did when I had like a fashion blog, and I would like to have, to have some kind of practice like that again, because like I said, I actually really enjoyed it when I was a kid. And then social media feels like part of the job and part of the game. And then in terms of writing, like I just write down what's in my head, and that has largely taken the form of trying to remember things and make sense of things that happened to me. And I do want to keep writing fictional works like this. And also, I really appreciate how much, like with writing Glimpses of the Moon or with screenwriting that I've done, the considerations are so much less about me and, me being really aware of the meaning I'm giving to different things in my life. It's a lot more like, does this scene work or doesn't it? As opposed to like, are you really attached to this thing that happened to you or not? So writing Glimpses too, I mean, now of course we're done with it and I can see that I was working things out through it. But I think because it's obviously based on this Wharton book and it's sort of silly and it's not, I don't think of it as autobiographical, even though there are pieces of my experience in it. That was really freeing too.
How mindful are you in your day-to-day life of the fact that in order for your work to be consumed and in order for you to make a living, you have to create a coherent narrative of your public-facing self?
I think the narrative making comes in, it's more that I feel aware of like needing to use Instagram or to do publicity. And the narrative making comes in as part of that, like as I'm sitting here. But I think most people I know, whether they are actors or writers or directors, are constantly trying to make the same calculus where you're like, I can't do things that have some kind of intangible benefit but are supposed to be in some vague way, quote, good for my career, which often means like, I don't know, free work. But it also can feel like there's so little to hold on to and you have so little control and there isn't a super clear path all the time. And so you're like, should I be doing everything in my power to be as successful as possible? But like, I don't want to spend my time that way. So I think most people I know who do this sort of thing are often trying to navigate, what do I have to do? What do I want to do? And how can I just make things as much as possible?
From one former wunderkind to another, how do you feel about being a former wunderkind?
I would say it's another thing like the narrative making that's like, I don't really think about that unless I'm, say, asked about it right now.
But you live with the consequences of it all the time. You know what I mean?
I mean, when I was younger, I felt, and Rookie was toward the end of Rookie and after Rookie folded, I felt way more conscious of outgrowing it and outgrowing a status of, being like, quote, good for your age or gifted. All these different things that are sort of compliments, but also ways of taking away some of your agency, I think. I was conscious of losing that, and I did find that very emotionally hard. And you're also like, who am I going to be as an adult? Like, will even just the people in my life still like me? Adults can be messier and more complicated. And was I just kind of, a girl is a lot less threatening to people than a woman. So that was hard. But when that kind of passed, like especially once Rookie folded, and so I didn't have to want to talk about, adolescence anymore, I felt like I just really started to appreciate, going into a rehearsal room and it not, my age not being a big deal and being surrounded by other people my age or people younger than me. And I mean, the way I see it now, I'm just like, I got like the best arts education anyone could ask for when I was really young in all these different fields. And how do I, how do I use that now?
Well, Tavi, we're out of time, but thank you so much for talking to me. I think you know how much I admire you and your work, and I'm always grateful to get to see you and talk to you.
Thank you, Jesse. I really enjoyed this conversation.